Welcome, everyone. I'm Deborah Stein, JDCA Arizona Chapter Lead, and thank you for taking the time on a Sunday to participate in the first of many JDCA Arizona Chapter events to be held in 2022. We're joined today by Jewish Democrats from across the Grand Canyon State to hear from a panel which includes Ann Heitland, the chair of I always mispronounce this, Coconino County Democratic Party, Nalexia Galloway, the executive director of the Maricopa County Democratic Party, Miranda Lopez, director of the Pima County Democratic Party, Lisa Senor, chair of the Pinal County Democratic Party, and Dottie Morris, who's on the community liaison chair of the Yavapai County Democratic Party. They're all with us to discuss what's at stake in the midterm elections. After we wrap up our conversation with the panel, stick around and we'll have an open mic schmooze for our informal chapter group. And before we start, I want to give a shout out to JDCA board members, Michael Rosenzweig, who's vice chair of management and operations, along with Mike Tarnoff, vice chair of outreach, and Jonathan Allen, who is the JDCA chapter outreach director, who are all with us today because electing Democrats in Arizona is extremely important to the JDCA as a whole. For those of you who are new to the JDCA, welcome. And throughout the 2020 election, as the video said, we mobilized over 1.7 million Jewish voters through our 15 state chapters. And as Arizona chapter members, our work to mobilize the vote for the midterm starts now. So without further ado, and no pun intended, we've prepared 4 questions for our panel. If we have time before our chapter schmooze, we'll take some member questions. And if you have them, please feel free to drop them in the chat. And I'll turn over the meeting now to chapter steering committee member, Michelle Steinberg, who has our first question.
Hi, and welcome everybody. It's wonderful to see so many of you here, and thank you and welcome to our guests. So I look forward to the conversation. So the first question is for all of you, and we'll just take a couple of minutes to answer it. And we've all seen what's happening at the legislature in terms of the attacks on voting rights and access to voting. And I know it's troubling all of us, but what we need to know from you is what your county's plans are to get out the vote and to make sure voters vote down ballot. Why don't we start with Ann? And you're muted. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Well, turnout among Democrats in Coconino County comes down to 2 elements. And I should say that also applies to our large group of left-leaning independents. The 2 elements are energizing our large progressive community, and second, making the voting process less intimidating to historically low turnout Democrats. For the first group, it's about issues. Sometimes that's climate change, sometimes it's a city council election, sometimes it's education. We have to make the election relevant to what progressives care about. And when we manage to do that, we can get turnout in some of our most progressive precincts above 90% or even 95%. The historically low turnout Democratic group needs a sample ballot. We put a lot of money into printing and distributing one. And then we need to make numerous contacts with each of these voters with information about when and where to vote, including when and where to vote early and how to use their mail-in ballot. We have an Indigenous voter committee, which reaches out to the 30% of our Democrats who are Native Americans, and a Latin American voter committee, including part-time paid organizers for those groups. These committees work on voter contacts, We also have a system of regional captains organizing our precinct committee people and volunteers. So it's all about talking to voters, either in person, by phone, over the social media, and through snail mail, the most expensive, but sometimes necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Nalexia.
Hi, yes, Alexia Galloway, Maricopa County. And we are doing a lot of different things in Maricopa County when it comes to voting down ballot, but I'm very proud of the project that we just launched, which is the Bottoms Up campaign. And the Bottoms Up campaign speaks to your question, Michelle, which is what are we going to do to encourage voters to vote down ballot? We've changed that narrative and we want to change the culture, and we want our community to vote from the bottom of the ballot to the top of the ballot, because we saw this significant drop off in the 2020 election from Joe Biden all the way down. Like, we lost races in Maricopa County because people did not continue to vote all the way down that ballot. So we launched the Bottoms Up campaign, and we want them to vote from the bottom up. And so that project will focus on issue-based canvassing in Maricopa County. And it's a hybrid program that we created where it's small grassroots donors, where you can join it at a membership fee of $125 a year, or it's $10.41 a month. And every month we change the issue that we're focusing on, that we're talking about in Maricopa County, and we're providing resources tying it to those local elections. And so next month, well, this month, now that we're in February, we're doing Bottoms Up for Health. And so we're partnering with Healthcare Rising to talk about the different health resources that are available in Maricopa County, and tying that back to the Maricopa County Special Healthcare Board race that we have coming up in the fall. So those are the type of things that we are doing in Maricopa County that we look forward to continue to do. I know that in March it's Women's Rights Month, and so we will be looking to do Bottoms Up for women reproductive rights. So those are the different type of issues, the different type of things that Maricopa County is looking to do. So we just launched this program in November of last year, and we already had our first canvas last month. So we do go out once a month and we do canvas for issue-based organizing in the county. So that is our approach to supporting local down ballot and voting from the bottom up.
Terrific, thank you. Dottie. You're muted.
Yeah, I'm muted. I may need some assistance from Holly in all of this. This is my first meeting and I'm sort of learning all about this. We have been very active. For the first time, we're really taking the meetings beyond Prescott. And the Democratic Party in the past in Yavapai County had their meetings in Prescott. And this was before Zoom, it was even on FaceTime, to the Verde Valley. We're spreading beyond the Verde Valley, going to various communities, as well as going to Black Canyon City and other locations to try to get activity within the county, because it is so huge. It's a very, very Republican county. It's hard to even describe it. Currently, Paul Gosar is our congressman, so that should give you an idea of what we're facing, as well as the largest in numbers of Republican women as a club in the entire United States is here in the Prescott area. So we are on an uphill climb and we're not giving up, that is for sure. We've been very busy in that, as well as petition drives for various causes. We're working on voter registration as well at various public events. We're having voter registration drives. There have been efforts in sending out postcards, and we are really working at getting O'Halloran elected in our district. Now that we've had redistricting, we're included with the Navajo and Hopi reservation, which is rather odd. Most of the Democrats, I would say, in our district are actually in Yavapai County, the section that is Sedona. Prescott is a whole different world from Sedona. So we are trying our best to get interest going within the Democratic Party, because every vote counts in getting Senator Kelly elected.
Thank you, Dottie. Miranda. Oh, there you
There we
go.
go. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so here in Pima County, we're in a situation where we have about 250,000 Democratic voters here in Pima County. So our job has kind of become preparing our supporters as best we can for this upcoming year. So especially when it comes to party infrastructure, making sure that we're prepared for outside groups coming in. But we also have refocused our efforts on some more local issues. So making sure that people are attending Board of Supervisors meetings where public support is really necessary, especially for some of these proposals like establishing vote centers in Pima County and things like that. And so that's kind of what our main prerogative has been, is keeping our precinct committee people engaged and also increasing our precinct committee person capacity, but also, having to do that within the restrictions of the redistricting and everything that's happening with that.
Okay, thank you. I think we lost.
She's going to try to call in from her phone. Her internet crashed. So I'll turn it over to Brandon for our next question, and hopefully she'll be able to jump in on this one.
Thank you all.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thank you, Deborah, and good afternoon, everybody. So this next question, as everyone on this Zoom knows, this is an election year. We've got a huge election coming up later this year. So the question for each of our panelists: how do your counties recruit and support candidates to run for office? Let's start with Alexia.
Yes, and one of the things that we are doing in Maricopa County is we have launched a Future Leaders of Arizona program, and that program is to recruit and train first-time candidates to run for school board. And so we have been very successful in that. We launched that program at the end of last summer. And so we had our first training this week, actually, with our candidates. So we have some very strong candidates for our technology boards in Maricopa County. But for us, we're focusing on the bottom of the ballot. So when we're looking at recruiting, we're looking at recruiting for school boards, for the college governing boards, for our technical boards that we have, and then moving on to our other positions that we have locally. And so if we do have individuals that do not necessarily want to be in education, and we have other opportunities for them, we're encouraging them to seek those other positions, but also being able to support them. So although we're recruiting and training on the staff side in Maricopa County, our executive board has launched a program where we are reaching out to all the governing board members in Maricopa County and identifying what the successes have been on their boards, and being able to take those successes and notify the community of, like, this is what they're doing on these governing boards. But we do also know that our governing boards are under attack. We have Purple for Parents that are attacking our governing board members. We have critical race theory being a topic of conversation. We have face masks being another topic. And so how can we support our governing board members that are currently elected? And so all we do is we tie them into our legislative districts, and we tell them, when do you need us to show up? And whenever they tell us that they need us to show up to support whatever position that is, then we activate and mobilize our district and our counties to support them, whether that's showing up at the school board meetings, whether that's writing emails or making phone calls. We activate our school board base. And actually, the Scottsdale Advocate Group has been very instrumental in creating what that structure looks like in Maricopa County. And we've been able to take that and implement it. So we have a program, Future Leaders of Arizona, where we're building that pipeline, because as you can see, we have a lot of Democrats in Arizona that are seeking higher office, and they're vacating their roles at different levels of government. And we honestly just don't have the people to fulfill those positions. They're not ready to govern. And so with the Future Leaders of Arizona program, that is a true pipeline that we need on the Democratic side, so that when we do have people transition for higher office, we're able to plug those individuals into the next level of government, and we don't miss a step and we don't skip a beat, and we're still able to be successful in this state.
Awesome. Thank you. Dottie, same question to you.
We're facing some of the offices that you mentioned in our county are nonpartisan, although they're not truly nonpartisan. But as a Democratic Party, we can advise, but we're not running, like for school board, a Democratic candidate. We can sort of hint, but we're not running an active campaign. For County Board of Supervisors, another nonpartisan office, that is very critical in our community, especially with water issues and growth, again, nonpartisan. So we can't really work on that. We can at the state legislature, and that we're trying to focus on, but it is rather difficult in our district. We're trying our best. The Republicans, we are hearing, will be running somebody for the state Senate who is very well known as a Republican. And again, we're going to be facing a very uphill climb in that area. Maybe Holly has something to say in that regard too.
I do. I wanted to jump in. We actually have a clean slate of candidates. So our legislative district, LD1, is a 27.5% Republican favored leaning district. So we're not winning these races. So what we've done is we've recruited a clean slate, 3 people to run who are running with the notion they're not going to win the election. Hence, they're running clean because they don't want to take money from other candidates who have a chance to win. However, we will have 3 candidates for the 2 House seats and the 1 Senate seat. And that's exciting, actually, because at least no race will be uncontested at the state legislature. And that's unique, I think. Maybe other counties or LDs are doing that, but it was the first time we're doing it.
Awesome. Thank you, both Dottie and Holly. Let's go over to Miranda.
Hi, yeah, so in Pima County, we actually don't have a lot of countywide offices that are going to be up for election this year. Unfortunately, there's like 1 or 2. But we have kind of taken some guidance from Nalexia's program, or the FLOW program. And so we're working on recruiting and training candidates for school board, because most of the school boards in Pima County are actually controlled by Republicans, which a lot of people aren't quite aware of, because they think, oh, Pima County, it's really blue. There's a lot of Democrats. Yes, there is, but the problem is trying to engage people and trying to get them to realize their own agency, that they can do things. They just have to, as our county recorder says, they just have to show up. So that's part of what we do. The other part of what we do is, of course, we offer support for all of our candidates. We can't pick sides if there are 2 Democrats or more running against each other, but our office acts as a hub for all of our candidates. They can, print materials, they can make phone calls, host phone banks, host volunteer events there. And so we try to be as much of a resource in that area as we can.
Perfect. Thank you. And let's turn it over to Anne.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to say a lot of things that have already been said. We offer education about the basics of running for office and refer potential candidates to other educational resources like the Run for Something group. We recruit candidates from among our precinct committee people and volunteers, but we try to go beyond that to all Democrats, especially the strong ones. We've successfully run text banks to try to identify people who are interested in running for office. We ask them to run for things like city council or school board or the community college district board. And our office is a hub for candidates to collect signatures. We promote e-sign on equal signing online as much as we can. We offer candidates the opportunity to speak at our monthly meetings and at our committee meetings. And wherever we're doing voter registration, candidates are welcome to join us, stand and talk to voters and get signatures on their petitions. That's a lot of summer festivals and year-round flea markets that we run over our very large county. Sometimes it takes 2 to 3 cycles to develop a candidate. So it's important to maintain a kind of mentoring relationship over a period of time with candidates like that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Lisa, welcome back. Sorry for the technical difficulties. So we have Lisa here from Pinal County. I'm going to ask a kind of 2-pronged question. So Michelle had earlier asked, what are your county's plans to get out the vote, make sure voters vote down the ballot? And then I had asked, what are counties doing to recruit and support candidates to run for office?
Well, first, why don't we tackle what are we doing to help recruit candidates to run for office? I am sure that each of them have already touched on the point that sometimes it is we want to recruit from our PC base. But in addition to that, Pinal County has reached out to the Hispanic Council of Pinal County. We have reached out to the NAACP within Pinal County and contacted a lot of our city council leaders who are Democratic to start floating us some names. We've also used our data to accumulate what would be high voting propensity Democrats and have a wonderful list where phone calls are already occurring, trying to recruit them to become candidates in our county. As of Friday evening, we got an additional one for city council in the city of Coolidge. So we are very actively pursuing that. And could you repeat the first question? Because I could go on and on about Pinal County.
So, I mean, I think everyone, you'll find all of these questions are related to one another. But the first question was more, what are your plans to make sure we get out the vote for the elections coming up and make sure that our voters vote down the ballot as well?
Now, this is where it'll be really interesting. Pinal County and Maricopa County actually have a very similar program. They call theirs bottoms up and we call ours trickle up, but it is very similar. We are working very diligently to ensure that we create this perpetual candidate pool, whether it comes from our from our PCs to those that are running for school boards, to those that are running for our city councils and so forth. It is in the process of going. And like Ann said, it could take a couple cycles for it to get fully developed. But our hope is that it will create this perpetual pool that we can pick and we can grab from and ask them to run for office. We've also instituted a mentorship program where right now the gentleman that has decided that he wanted to run for city council in Coolidge will actually get some help from a city council member in Casa Grande. It is the first, I do believe, of its kind that we have done, but we're rocking and rolling and ready to go.
All right, thank you. I'm going to turn it back over to Deborah.
Okay, for our next question, I'm going to turn it over to Holly Plug.
Thank you, Deborah. So Ann and I have worked for the last year on redistricting, and we worked really hard, and we got a lot of people out to testify to deaf ears. But having said that, it's not all bad. Our district is horrible, but it's not all bad statewide. So I would like for all of you to tell us how the new lines provide opportunities in your districts, and at the same time, what seats are at risk now because of the new redistricting. So why don't we start with Miranda?
Yeah, so for Pima County, the maps weren't as bad as they could have been. We still have a couple of areas where it will definitely be a battle. So for instance, CD6, which was formerly CD2, is going to be a pretty hotly contested race, not just in the primary, but then also in the general. We also have what is now LD17. There were a couple of legislative districts that we had that were relatively blue, and then they got kind of split up, and pieces of them ended up in this new district called LD17, and it's going to be like a pretty intense battle, that one district.
Miranda,
So that's
Miranda,
yeah.
can for the rest of the group that doesn't know the districts, can you talk just explain what CD2 is and whose district that was carved from?
Yes, so CD2, Congressional District 2, here in Pima County, we were part of 3 congressional districts, Congressional Districts 1, 2, and 3, where one was mainly up in the north part, and that was actually part of Tom O'Halloran's congressional district, one of the largest geographic congressional districts in the US. But now, after this redistricting process, we're down to 2 congressional districts where you have, it kind of goes, the split goes up kind of through Tucson. It's very similar to what it was in the past, but without that additional congressional district, it basically just means that, you know, what we have is now CD6 is more of a battleground than ever.
And that was that's the open Ann Kirkpatrick seat.
Exactly, yes.
At the redistricting, Tucson was hotly contested for attempts to really gerrymander it pretty badly, which somewhat succeeded, but thankfully didn't totally succeed.
Yeah, it was, like I said, it could have been a lot worse. It's not great, but it definitely could have been a lot worse than it was. I know that it's actually, we were pretty lucky in this part of the state as opposed to other parts of the state.
And Miranda, the plus minus in the Democrat Republican on that congressional seat, can you tell us where that stands now?
So I don't have the exact numbers.
But
Gosh,
is it leaning
I know I have it open, like,
Republican,
tab somewhere.
leading Democrat? That's kind of, I think, what.
Or yeah, so for CD7, it's Democrat leaning. For CD6, I don't think it. Gosh, I don't even remember. I think it's like so close that it doesn't necessarily lean one way or the other. Yeah,
it's going to be a battle in that district because it's an open.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about your legislative district, though? How many legislative districts do you have in Pima County?
That is a great question, because that is actually part of what we still need to figure out, because geographically it might look like, oh, most of this legislative district is in this county, therefore that county is, you know, in charge, but it's actually based on the population. So we need to figure out what part of the population within that legislative district, within that county, is the biggest. And then that's actually the county that we're going to decide makes the decisions. So we're still in the process of figuring that out for some of our legislative districts, but we've got most of our legislative districts figured out by now. So we have legislative district 17 is the battleground. And then we also have 18, 19, 20, 21, and then not 22, but 23. And so right now, I think we're still trying to figure out the 16 and 19, you know, where those are going. But our new homes for our PCs.
Thank you. It is confusing, and especially when you have multiple counties in a single legislative district, We lived with that for 10 years, so I know what that's like.
Yeah.
How about we go to
Yeah.
Alexa? Alexa, you're not too complicated in Maricopa County.
To say the least, to say the least. Everyone knows the great state of Maricopa County. Right now, we are pending. We were at 20 legislative districts in the last decade. Right now, I think we're leaning closer to 22 legislative districts out of the 30 up here. And so for us, Arizona, ADLCC, the Arizona Democratic Legislative Caucus Committee or Committee Caucus, I may have reverse the words, but there's tremendous help in Maricopa County because they are the ones that primarily do all of our like the county does not do any legislative races up here. We've primarily focused on local elections. I can't give you the report on Maricopa County and where we're leaning. We only have 2 Democrats elected countywide up here. So with that, our primary focus is our county elections, including our nonpartisan and our partisan races. And so for us, we're having a lot, I know there's a lot of red flags because there are some of our current legislative candidates that are incumbents in the same district. So that's tough for us because it's like we have people that have been in the legislative, they have great tenure, but now they're up against their colleagues because of redistricting. So trying to identify what we're going to do in those spaces. We do have some great battleground areas out in the Tempe Mesa area. We have a new legislative district out there that is leaning Democratic, and we have not had that opportunity in the last 2 decades. So we're looking to pick up in that area. But for the most part, Maricopa County will not be a huge transition for us. Our biggest thing will be picking up the county and winning those elections, as we only have 2 Democrats countywide elected. So we're very red in Maricopa County. We're not even purple.
Thank you. I'm going to save Dottie and Ann for last because they're overlap somewhat. So let's go to Lisa.
We actually have experienced something I think some of the larger counties have previously experienced in a lot of redistricting. We now have 4 legislative districts running through our county when we did not have quite that many before. We now have legislative 17, which we share with Pima County. We also have LD 16, which we share with Pima and Maricopa. That's the first time. We have LD 7, it gets even better. We're 4 counties. And we have all 4 of those counties. It's almost been like an ad hoc committee where we are working very hard collaboratively to build a slate in that LD of candidates and under the guidance of Ann. We also have LD 15, which is one that we share with Maricopa County as well. Pinal County is very red. Our supervisor, we do not have a single Democrat and elected at county office. So in a lot of ways, the programs that we have running are almost the same as Maricopa County. We see it as an infrastructure issue. If we can build the party out, especially starting from the bottom up in this, our school boards and our boards at our city councils, and get our city council people elected, and then for our supervisors. This year, we don't really have a lot of county-wide offices that are up for, but these legislative districts are going to prove to be interesting, especially as Alexia said, the ADLCC will be pretty active in Pinal County this year for LD 16 specifically. So we got one of their top 5 targeting. So that's where we stand on our wonderful legislative districts and our CDs.
Yeah, 23, Alexia, is in Maricopa, is also one of the targeted districts. Okay, Dottie and Ann, you can both unmute yourselves because, our former CD, the LD, which was LD 6, was 4 counties. Maricopa, sorry about that, Yavapai, Coconino, Navajo, and what was the 4th one, Ann?
Apache.
No, not Apache.
Oh, you're Gila.
Gila, yeah,
Yeah.
Gila County. So we had meetings as LD6. We created an entity called the LD6 Working Group, and we had representatives from each of the 4 counties for the entire 2 years. Well, 10 years, but
4
the last,
years.
yeah, we had great candidates. We were a competitive district. We never won once in 10 years, but we had great candidates in the last 4, that's for sure. Now, since redistricting, Yavapai County is whole. So so now we just have 1 county for my LD1, and then Tom O'Halloran CD2. So can we, Dottie, can you talk about
Well,
that?
I could talk about the congressional district.
Okay, go ahead.
We could celebrate because we're passing off Gosar to another district, and and we are gaining Tom O'Halloran, but the district is gigantic and very odd. It was, my opinion, it was a way of breaking up the Navajo reservation and passing it off to an extremely Republican area of the state, which is Yavapai County, which weakens the vote of the Navajo and Hopi vote. And and I really am sorry to see that happen. But we are going to be very, very much active in supporting Tom O'Halloran, and he has already spoken to the Democratic women and to the Democratic Party locally. He's making himself very accessible, and I'm very pleased with that. And it's just been rather odd because the effort was originally to divide Yavapai County with Sedona going along with the district to go to Flagstaff, and that the extremely Republican portion, which would be on the west side of the mountains along here, would be the district with Prescott. And that is not the way it was divided. They've included us in this gigantic, awkward district. And Holly can fill you in. I'm very sorry I'm not up to date on so much of this. I wasn't sure how this was going to be approached today.
It's
But
not
Holly, you've been the expert on this.
That's okay. Anne can weigh in too. And
Well, the congressional map keeps all of Coconino County in Democrat Tom O'Halloran's district as we were before, but by adding that portion of Yavapai County that wasn't part of the district, it has become more conservative, whereas before it was rated as a competitive race. And sometimes in the last 10 years, it's gone one way and sometimes another. But for the last 3 cycles, a Democrat has won. So the competitive measures are a little bit discouraging. However, O'Halloran has some advantages. The more conservative areas added to the district in Yavapai County are areas that he represented when he was a Republican in the state legislature. So he knows people and has ties and has some credibility there. His likely opponent is someone who believes the January 6th attack was legitimate political discourse, which will help us. And Tom is popular across the spectrum among Democrats, though progressives sometimes dislike some of his positions. They're well aware that he votes with Nancy Pelosi when she needs him. He's a very hands-on politician, spending a lot of time visiting this huge district that accounts for about 1/3 of the entire state. And he has good relationship with the tribes that make up 18% of the voting population. So in spite of the rightward shift, I am optimistic and about keeping this district in Democratic hands with O'Halloran. It'll take a lot of work, but we're up for it. As far as the legislative districts, Coconino County now has 3 legislative districts. One of them is very tiny. That is, it's the city of Sedona, which was put out of Coconino County and over with the LD1 the Yavapai County district that Holly spoke about earlier. Inspired by what Yavapai County has done in creating a clean slate, in our heavily Republican district, we've formed a working group with Pinal County, Gila County, and Navajo County to work on developing a clean slate. We're working with the same consultants that the Yavapai County group is working with, and we hope to have candidates to announce by the end of this month. Our 3rd district is also highly uncompetitive. However, it's in favor of the Democrats. The district is made up of tribal lands that stretch all the way to the New Mexican border and into Mojave County and include the north half of Flagstaff. And we have some candidates there who are already serving in the legislature. One very strong candidate was appointed to replace Jemasita Peshlikai, who'd been in the legislature as a leader for some time, and we're very happy with her performance so far. That's the picture in Coconino County. We are clear that we're not going to get any help in our legislative races from ADLCC because we're just at the bottom of the barrel on competitiveness. So it's up to the county parties to make it happen.
Thank you, everybody.
May I add one other thing that I think is rather critical, and this has to do with laws being forced through or at least looked at by the state legislature, and that's the accessibility to voting, because that is so important when we're talking about the Navajo reservation and the Hopi reservation. And if we're going to get the vote out, just to do that in such a vast area, in such a rural area, that's going to require a lot of work. And those are Democratic voters. So I think it's really important that the party focus in on educating people how to vote in those areas and getting them out to vote.
It's a very good point, Dottie. Thank you for going through what is a very complicated redistricting scenario. And for our 4th and final question that we've prepared, I'm going to turn it over to Jan Michael Greenberg.
Thank you, Deborah. As a member of Scottsdale Unified School District's governing board, I've had firsthand experience with the Republican efforts and coordinated attacks on public education and our public schools, including banning books, attacking critical race theory, attacking our LGBTQ+ students. Now, Donald Trump and the Save Our Schools movement activated many former Republican or right-leaning independent voters to vote for Democrats in 2018 and 2020, especially for education funding here in Arizona. But now that Donald Trump is no longer on the ballot, Republicans are using critical race theory and mask policies in schools to activate some of these same voters in their favor. If Virginia is any indication of how successful this campaign has been, what are your county's plans to engage these voters to vote for Democrats in this election? And I'll start with Dottie.
Are you talking about at the school board level as far as, because right now, the school board is nonpartisan in voting, and I did make an error. The county is partisan elected, but the school board is not. And
thank you. I think the question is general to legislative candidates all the way up the ballot, not just school boards. But again, if we look at Virginia and the governor race there, many pundits have pointed to the very educational-based arguments that that race focused on. Do you think that that's an issue for this upcoming election in your county? And if so, what are your county's plans to address those?
Right now, I don't know of any specific plans. I do know that one of the major problems we have is that our public school district is getting smaller and being drawn into charter schools. And that is another issue that we are facing as well. But as far as a specific topic, as far as I know, that has not been brought up. We have actually a very large senior population, and I know the senior population tends to go along with what you were just referring to, but specifically, I don't know of anything within the county at this point.
Well, thank you, Dottie. I'll turn it over to Lisa. Do you have any thoughts on this issue?
So it has been concerning for us, but not as likely as much as it has been for Maricopa County, because we all saw nationally that this has become a large movement. And overall for our county, we haven't really seen that much of an increase in the vitriol that they can push out. Now, on the aspects of it that border our county with Maricopa or the more Democratic leaning Pima, we have. And what we have done is that we have contacted our Democratic school board members in those areas, and they usually will send us out notices of what may be coming on their agenda that may cause an issue. Recently, we were in the Apache Junction area fighting with doing calls to the public because they were coming up with a new history curriculum. And this is where the truth of history matters and the true history matters. And we actually had 5 of us there in a call to public, stating that we needed to have the truth in our history. As it goes in further deeper into the county, we are red. It just has not popped up near as much as we have seen all in the news, like for Maricopa County. We haven't seen anything for critical race theory to come up in our board of supervisors, but we pay attention and we're watching. And if it does, you can count on that there will be a call to action for us to be there.
Thank you. Anne, do you have any further comments on this, how this issue has perhaps affected Coconino County?
Well, I think this is true in Coconino County, but I think it's true throughout Arizona that Democrats can win this election without swinging any Trump voters. We just have to keep our 2020 coalition together. We have to keep our energy up, and we have to focus on getting out the majority that voted for Biden and Kelly in 2022. And if we can do that, we can ignore the Trump voters. They lost by several million votes. So let's remember that. Then as far as the Virginia election, I've read quite a bit about that lately. And probably the commentary that struck me most is it was about education. But when you say education, that means different things to different voters. So some voters were concerned about the things that you mentioned. Other voters were concerned about education funding. Other voters were concerned about classroom size. Other voters were concerned about virtual learning. So I think we need to dig down. And in Arizona right now, the big issue for education, which many people aren't aware of yet, and we have to make them aware of it, is the aggregate expenditure limit. That Republicans are sitting in the legislature doing nothing when our schools are going to be shut down if we don't remove that cap. And if we do remove that cap, then there are going to be other things like that. The Republicans don't own the education issue in Arizona. We do, and we have to remember that and talk about the things Democrats stand for in education. School boards and city council races are one of my big concerns in Coconino County. And I'm working closely with our Democratic county superintendent of schools and with the Education Association to recruit candidates for school boards in places like Fredonia, Page, Grand Canyon. Even in Flagstaff, it's hard to get people to spend the time and energy to serve on a school board. It's just a lot of hard, thankless work for which you get a lot of criticism. So again, it's about candidate recruitment. And I think that we win those elections by presenting candidates who talk about the value of public schools and the dangers presented by Republican policies, the difficulties finding candidates. So thank you for serving.
Well, I appreciate that. And I do appreciate you mentioning the aggregate expenditure limit. And just for anyone on here who might not know what that is a 1980 constitutional cap on how much money can be spent on public school district funding, not charter schools. Charter schools were created after this law was passed, and so this law does not apply to them. Their funding is not at stake, but public school districts funding is at stake, and it's about a 16% decrease in funding. Public school funding is funded in real time. It is in your year, current year funding, which is very different from other budgets. And that means that if the Arizona legislature does not approve spending more than that cap, school districts will have to cut by March 1st. School districts will have to cut 16% of their budget this year for the final few months of school. For Scottsdale Unified School District, that's nearly $30 million. And of course, the impact is greater for the larger school districts and proportionately very significant for the rural and smaller school districts throughout our state. So would just like to elaborate on that. This has been a really interesting conversation on these efforts. I'd like to turn to Miranda to see if Pima County has faced similar issues and whether they have, working on this kind of trickle up or bottoms up approach, or working as Coconino has by really focusing on school board efforts. What has been, is this an issue in Pima County, and what are your efforts there?
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like Pima County is unique in that we have a lot of Democrats. We have a lot of resources. The problem for us has been mobilizing and getting people out. So when it comes to engaging, like, let's say, former Republicans or right-leaning independents, that's not as much of a priority for us as mobilizing our base and growing our precinct committee person capacity. Because if we can do those things, then sure, maybe we could talk to independents. But right now, our priority is mobilizing our strong supporters and just getting people more engaged, because there is this sense of exhaustion. It's been an uphill battle since 2016, and people are tired. People have gotten burned out. I was one of them at one point. I was just like, okay, this has been a lot. But refocusing on the more local issues, so recruiting for school board, for instance, like we just had, we're having every Saturday is a chance for people to come in and sign petitions for candidates and ballot initiatives. So that's kind of reignited my passion for just getting more people involved in what's going on in their local community.
Thank you very much, Miranda. And for our final speaker, I'll turn to Alexia, and hopefully she'll avoid any trouble that I've caused for her this past few months.
Yes, of course, Maricopa County has to be the problem child, and we have had issues such as critical race theory that we have to deal with. But honestly, race is always on the ballot. Democrats and Republicans both use race when it benefits them the most. And so it's not any surprise that critical race theory is something that was created, a false narrative that was created that is moving. What I've told people as Democrats is that we will not be responding to Republican messaging because there's no need to respond to things that are untrue. We have to have our own our own messaging in Maricopa County when it comes to school board, when it comes to race, when it comes to education. Anne made a very great point when she said that education is different for each individual. So we have to decide what that education conversation is and what we are going to do about it. When we talk about how we're going to get these voters out, we have treated voting as something that is very transactional. We have not valued our voters. We have not taken them serious. We show up during Get Out to Vote, and we want them to vote for who we tell them to vote for. We have not built trust in those communities. So if we want to truly, truly build from the bottom up when it comes to Democrats, we have to invest in those communities, and that is providing resources, that's providing funds. In the last election in 2020, there was conversations about student loans. There was all these conversations, these promises, the Joe Biden agenda and things of that nature. We have to have those conversations that are going on the ground. The Save Democracy message does not resonate because, as you all know, in the Jewish community, democracy looks different for your community, just like it looks different for those in the Black community. So when you say we have to save democracy, some people will say, I haven't seen democracy. I don't know what democracy looks like. So it's on us to do a better job of showing up for our voters every day. So that's why you will see the programming and the projects that are coming out of Maricopa County. You will see us investing resources in the community. You will see us having projects talking about those issues because we know that we have to show up every day. If we show up every day and the only thing we ask you to do is just to vote and vote for those people, that's the very least thing that we can ask you to do because we've showed up for you every time that you needed it. And so for us, it's using the resources that we have to elevate our communities. Rent control is crazy right now. You know, like, of course, we have a federal message, but we have people that are being priced out of our communities, that's being priced out of our counties. And so what are we going to do to show them that local elections matter, that voting down ballot matters, because those are the type of things that are under local control. It's not federal control, it's local control. So changing that narrative and showing that when you vote locally, it changes your day-to-day outcome. So it's on us. We have a responsibility to our community to lead with that message and to show that why being a Democrat is the best thing and why trusting us with your vote will give you the results that you need to be success in your day-to-day operations.
Well, thank you very much. And I appreciate all of your time on that question. I'll turn it over now to Deborah.
Okay, we're running a little over. I thank you all for coming, our panel, but members stay on. But before we move to our chapter schmooze, I just want to say to the panel that your being here means a lot to us, and it's a show of your support to the Jewish community. And as Jews, we have faced a rise of anti-Semitic incidents over the last 2 years to over 50% here in Arizona, and nationally, over 60% of all hate crimes are directed to the Jewish community. And 2 of our members here today have had anti-Semitic threats directed to them, and each were serious enough that the FBI needed to be called in to investigate. Arizona Republican members of the state legislature and Congress have repeatedly used the Holocaust as a punchline for their anti-vax and anti-mask campaigns and openly support white nationalists and neo-Nazis. Incidents of vandalism, bomb threats to our synagogues and community centers have become a way of life for us. Your continued support of the Jewish community by publicly calling out anti-Semitic remarks and anti-Semitic incidents means a lot to us. They help show the rest of Arizona's Democrats that these incidents, comments, affiliations are not only wrong, they're extremely dangerous. So I thank you so much for taking your time on a Sunday to tell us about what's at stake in the midterms. And you all, I'm going to play a little video, and then I'll just tell you a little bit about what a chapter does here at the JDCA. And then the panel is free to leave, and then we'll start our chapter schmooze. Thank you.
My name is Deborah Tenenbaum.
Adam Rosen.
I'm Sharon.
Josh Iger.
I'm Susan Friedenberg.
My name is Julian Gurney.
Along came the Jewish Democratic Council of America with a call to action in my email box. I clicked on it and read about it and immediately knew it was calling to me.
I think it's so important to be a part of JDCA and to extend our reach in our community.
In the past, I didn't know how to get involved. I was unsure. JDCA came into my life. I felt connected.
It was much more than phone calls.
Speakers just blew my mind. And I just felt so proud, whether they were Jewish or not Jewish, just to be a part of this and to know that I was doing something to help them to make a difference.
We've created over 15 chapters across the country, recruited thousands of volunteers to our events, to our volunteer opportunities, and we really have become like a family.
I phone bank with Jewish Dems because it's my way to express my passion for the importance of voting.
I spoke to somebody whose husband had Alzheimer's, and she had no idea how she could make his vote count. And we were able to work with her with the voter hotlines and the information we were provided. And absolutely, her husband was able to vote.
I was well armed with information and instructions, and it was everything I needed to make effective phone calls.
It's really incredible to see all of these passionate volunteers ready to phone bank, ready to call as many voters as they can, asking questions to help them make better calls.
I remember after my first call, I looked around my kitchen and I literally got up on my feet and gave it one of those, yes!
I just want to thank everyone.
Thank you to JDCA. Thank you for every call.
All the hard work, for the commitment to turn our country around. Thank God for groups like this.
Thank you to the volunteers. Thank you to JDCA. Thank you to everyone who played a role.
Well, thank you again to our panel. You guys are free to leave. And for the rest of the chapter, there's been a lot to unpack that's been happening in Arizona. So before we begin our chapter schmooze, let's give a big thank you to our panel and our guests, and let's talk about it. So let our chapter schmooze begin.